Welcome back to our PAT series, the practical application of theory. Now, this video is all about your responsibilities, your legal responsibilities as skipper of a small boat. And the reason why it's the first video in this series is because unless you have a clear understanding of these responsibilities, unless you're mindful of them, then it's very hard to justify doing things in the way that we are advocating. Now, I'm not here to be a fun sponge, quite the opposite. What I'm going to be talking about today is how you can adopt a number of different approaches, which means you are habitually doing things in a way which fulfills your responsibilities as a skipper. Now, if you know you're doing things in a way which fulfills those responsibilities, then actually you are able to get on and enjoy yourself and have fun a lot more easily. Okay, so the first thing to really bear in mind with all of this is that as a skipper of a small boat, the buck stops with you. Now, for example, if you hand the helm to another crew member and they crash jibe and another crew member is injured by that crash jibe, then actually it is your responsibility as skipper because you have handed the helm over to an inexperienced crew member who wasn't capable of helming. So what you really have to bear in mind with all of this is that you have to carefully judge the skills and capabilities of your crew, and you mustn't put them in situations where they're out of their depth. On the other hand, as a skipper, or especially as an instructor, you always want to challenge your crew and put them into that stretch zone where they're really learning. So this is a really careful balance to find, but don't put them in a position where they're uncomfortable. Now, crew management is a massive subject in its own right, but it's worth just touching on it here because actually if you get some fundamentals right with the crew management, actually your responsibilities as skipper are massively fulfilled. Now, fundamentally, what you have to do with your crew is listen to them and always work with them. So, one way of doing this is to say, guys, I'd really love to sail to the Isles of Scilly this week. Who's with me? Now, if all your crew go, yeah, completely up for that, we want to help you achieve that goal, then everything will tend to fall into place after that. If, however, on your way, you find that two crew members have maybe got some seasickness and not feeling very well, and they're going, actually, I'm really not too worried about going to the Isles of Scilly any longer, then it's really important that you, as skipper, listen to them and respond. What you cannot have on board is crew members working against you or even feeling as though they're not being listened to. It can create a toxic atmosphere, and it's actually where things can start to unravel and go wrong quite quickly. Now, on board a small boat, there are numerous risks and hazards that need to be managed. And you as skipper, whether you're working commercially or whether it's a private boat, it doesn't really matter. You as skipper are responsible for managing those risks. Now, if an accident occurs which results in an injury, or even worse, if somebody loses their life, then the legal test you are going to have to pass is to prove that you did everything in your power that could be reasonably expected of you to do to make sure that that accident couldn't occur. Now, the reality of it is that if somebody really injures themselves, or if somebody lose their life on board your boat, then the loved ones and the family of the victim could blame you for that accident. And that means that everything in the lead up to that event will be scrutinised very closely. Now, you may be the most proactive skipper there is, always wary and telling people of the risks on board your boat, winch handling, dropping the anchor, crash jibes. But unless you actually record that you have briefed people about these risks, then it's very hard to prove that you have actually done everything that could be reasonably expected of you to prevent such an accident from occurring. Now, the place to record your ways of managing risks is the logbook. This is the first document people are going to want to see if there's an accident on board your boat. At the beginning of every single trip, what I'll do is write down that a full safety brief has been given. Now, elsewhere on the boat, ideally in the training manual, there'll be a list of what a full safety brief consists of. So by writing full safety brief given in the logbook, you're referring back to that page in the training manual with a clear list of what that is. The next thing I'll record is that the VHF has been tested and is working, so radio check's been done, and engine checks. Next, we move on to the crew. Now, it is absolutely crucial that you record that you've asked all your crew whether they suffer from any illnesses that could affect their capacity as crew, such as heart disease, asthma, and also if they have any medication for that illness. If they do have any medication, that medication needs to be carefully managed. It can't just be a matter of being told that it's somewhere in their bag. You need to make sure that that medication is kept somewhere where at least you can access it quickly, and ideally the whole crew knows where it is. Having said that, you need to make sure that you invite all your crew to come to you privately and tell you about any medical conditions they may have. They may simply be uncomfortable about declaring it to the whole crew. The next thing, which is focused on the crew, is to record their abilities. So you've got to get an idea of how much sailing they've done. And until you've done this, you can't really make a plan of where you're going to go to. Now, that's at the beginning of each trip. At the beginning of each day, or actually in case of weather, every 6 hours, I'd also record the weather and the tides. Now, it's also a really good idea to record in the logbook the emergency contact details of everyone on board before you set off. Also, if you photograph that list of numbers and send it to a shore party who can then contact the next of kin on your behalf, should anything happen, that's actually a really good practice as well. Of course, as a school, we have already taken those details and we already have them to hand. Okay, so you've recorded lots of useful information here in the logbook before you set off on your trip. But it's important you keep using it throughout your whole voyage. This is the place where you record your method of managing risk. So, for example, you get to a nice anchorage and your crew want to go for a swim. Now, you don't want to be the skipper who says you can't go for a swim, it's too dangerous, but you need to manage those risks quite carefully. The first thing I'd write in the logbook is crew want to go for a swim. In UK waters, where it often is below cold water shock temperature, around 15 degrees, you'd need to record the temperature and make sure that you've briefed your crews about the risk of cold water shock. Now, they might all be cold water swimmers, in which case it's no problem for them, but make sure you've got that in the logbook. The next thing would be if there's a tide running. Okay, there's a knot of tide running, so we're going to have a line with a fender out the back of a boat so that if any crew can't make it back to the boat comfortably, they can grab that line and haul themselves along it. Next, I'd certainly want to write down their swimming abilities. Finally, I might also want to write that I've stationed a member of crew to stay in the cockpit, keeping watch on them at all times. Now, all of that would be done, and then it would also be recorded in the logbook. If then something happened and one of those swimmers did get into trouble, you can show that you have done pretty much everything you could have done to make sure that accident didn't occur. Now, this way of thinking has profound consequences for how you navigate. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the next video, when we're going to be looking at how on longer voyages, everything we've recorded in the logbook so far should be accompanied by a full passage plan. And also, crucially, what kind of information you need for pilotage to show that you've done a full plan to get you into the harbour at the end of the trip safely. I look forward to seeing you then.